Hey everybody, in this episode of iTalk Movies, we're getting up close and personal with filmmaker Peter Spirer. Let's do it.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk, we talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's iTalk Movies.
Hey everybody, Joe and Jed welcoming us here as we start this episode of iTalk Movies. This is the show where we get up close and personal with the people that are in front of or behind the camera, bringing you all that great filmed entertainment that you get to see in the theaters, maybe on demand at your own home, on your mobile streaming devices. I'm your host, Frank Moran. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie. Now, my guest today, he got his start as a musician. In fact, his group, the Toys, actually opened for Joe and Jet. And while he was doing that, he also got into filmmaking as well, hopping behind the camera, directing music videos, commercials, then took the full-on plunge into filmmaking. He's an Oscar-nominated director for his documentary back in '93, and he's currently, right now, having another film that's coming out. It's going to be coming out on June 20th on iTunes and Video on Demand, and May 26th, this Friday, in theaters. It is Spirit Game, Pride of a Nation. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome director Peter Spirer.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. This is so cool. So, I mean, you got your start as a musician. Were you born in New York?
I was born in New York, yeah, and then I moved to the South. I moved to Florida.
Really?
Yeah. I spent my time growing up at just a few minutes away from the University of Miami, which I eventually attended for film school.
So, at that whole time, was filmmaking your main pursuit, or was music your main pursuit?
It was really music, and my father said, son, I like the idea that, you're this musician, and our band was very successful down in Miami where we were playing. But he said, I think you need something to fall back on. So I decided filmmaking.
A nice, stable, reliable, steady career.
A real parachute, Yeah.
So when you tell him, it's like, you know what, I guess, all right, I'll pursue filmmaking as well. He's like, that's not exactly what I was thinking about as a fallback position.
Yeah, no, he accepted it. And growing up as a kid, I wasn't one of those kind of kids who had a Super 8 camera and shooting everything. I was more the kid that just loved movies. And my parents love movies as well. They're two New Yorkers, and they decided the best babysitter was to drop me off at the movie theater. I could remember seeing 2001 when I was maybe 7 years old, and I was the only one in the theater, and talk about an experience for a 7-year-old with no one around. But
how do you take in some of those Stanley Kubrick visuals and stuff as a 7-year-old? How do you interpret that?
I ask them about it now. I go, how could you drop me off? But I loved it. I'll tell you the truth. I loved it. I loved every moment of it. But it was a little daunting. Yeah.
Does something like that, seeing a film so early, does that become very much put in such an impression on you that kind of really influences where you're at as a filmmaker?
I think it helps you to engage your imagination, definitely. To see something like that, Lena Wertmuller, Truffaut films, they took me to everything. I mean, I can remember being the only kid in the movie theater, and that's the way I grew up, and I did have this love of movies, but to the point where I thought humans didn't make them. I thought they were like these magical things, and I was going to the University of Miami. Actually, I was studying business at the time. I think my father did say, son, you got to fall back on something, and I'm trying this business stuff, and it's really not working out. But a friend of mine who was a groupie of the band, she was also in the film department. She was our she was the president of the Film Association, and she said, we'd go to movies together, and she goes, my gosh, you know more about this stuff than I do. So you should take filmmaking. I said, filmmaking? They actually teach that? They go, yeah. And I was hooked. I mean, one production class, and that was it.
So you finished that, but you're also performing with your band as well. It was that at that time when as you're going to school, you're realizing, hey, you know what? I could not just be playing with these guys. I could also be shooting videos of us doing this stuff as well.
Well, yeah, and it was early on. MTV had just gotten going. Kind of dating myself, but yeah, MTV was just getting going, and I thought, gosh, I'll go to one of the professors and say, hey, why don't we do this music video? Here's an emerging, business, and some of these other businesses like commercials are very hard to get into, but I thought, what a great idea for our class to make a short. We had to make a 3-minute film anyway. He said no. And that semester I had to work on somebody else's film, and I almost left school. And the next semester I went to this professor who became a dear friend of mine, and I basically said to him, I said, look, my dad wants me to go to school. I'm not so sure about it, but if I take your class, can I do my music video? I want to do a music video. And he looked at me and he couldn't believe the audacity. And he said, you know what? I'll give you every opportunity to do it, but you have to convince the rest of the class. Well, so we made the video. It ended up winning the MTV Basement Tapes, and we were in the semifinals of, the Star Search competition. But yeah, it was.
What's it like entering at that time when it's basically just like almost like the early days of the internet, where nobody knew exactly how to capitalize on it, but early days of MTV, where it just seemed like, was it just a wide open?
My gosh, I miss those days so much. I miss the other filmmakers that made videos at that time, and it was so great because it was like the Wild West, and groups weren't spending tremendous sums of money on their music videos, and it was more of how can I say? It became when Matt Mahern really, Samuel Bayer, those guys, it became like a photographer's thing, and I loved it before that. I mean, I love what they do, but before that, there was, sometimes it would be literal, sometimes it would just be out there, and you had a diversity which, I think by the late '80s, it just, people are expecting certain looks and certain things.
What was it easy to be in Florida but still feel like, we can shoot something here and it is a realistic possibility that MTV could play this?
Oh, no. I had no idea that. I mean, we submitted the video, and I remember getting the call from MTV, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, they actually called us back and they said, we're considering putting this on. We have some issues with the video. There were some production issues like sound. The quality wasn't 100%. I mean, this was a very low budget. We shot it in film, but using the resources of the school, which weren't great. But it ended up doing well. And I remember they cut promos for the pieces of the video for the next 4 or 5 years. Or you could see pieces of our band in all kinds of different promos. Yeah.
So once you shoot that first music video, is that it? Is like, did you feel like music is great, but filmmaking is really where I want to pursue? No. Actually, I really thought our band would get a big record deal with a big company, and I hung in there probably longer than I should have. But we always had levels of success. We always had management companies. We were doing tours. We were playing the biggest clubs. We moved to New York because we felt we had done everything we could in Miami, and at some point you have to say you got to move on. We should have moved out to LA, but we moved to New York, which was more of a new wave scene at the time. I think our band, which, gosh, would we call ourselves, hair metal? But we were more of a hard rock band, AC/DC-ish kind of stuff, Rolling Stones, Do you miss the days of the hair metal bands?
Do I? Not really. I mean, I like a diversity of music, mm-hmm. and I kind of got tired on all that stuff. So, I was happy to see like the grunge movement happen, and I thought it got too bloated. It got too overdone.
Well, I can imagine just for the hair maintenance alone.
Oh yeah,
nice to see that era go away.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So were you saying back then, were you kind of rocking a really sweet mane of hair?
I did. There were, and it was like almost an image where you had to have that, or you didn't feel like you belonged. But I never felt comfortable, doing that stuff.
So you do music videos, but then you also getting into doing commercials and corporate videos as well. So kind of, what was it like when you were working on something that is not music related?
It was fine. And in the transition, there was one point where I had dreadlocks, and I was working for a wedding company, And I started to grow dreadlocks, and the guy said to me, he goes, "Hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. I mean, what are you going to do?" He goes, "Look, you're one of my main shooters. I mean, but I can't have that." So I showed up a couple of days later with a wig. And, you know, he's like, "Oh my God, I think I like you better with the dreadlocks." But, you know, the wig worked, and, you know, but yeah, there was some of that. You know, what was really interesting was at the record company level. So I'm in a band and I'm trying to get signed, and I'm also doing music videos. You know, I'm directing music videos. And the way these labels would speak with me as a musician was totally different than when I was the director. And, you know, I mean, it was almost like I was being spoken to as a child, as a guy in the band. And then, you know, when it's very, very strange.
When did you decide that, all right, as much as I love playing, it's time for me to step away from being a full-time musician and focus more on filmmaking?
You know, that occurred around 92. I think we had, again, done everything we could, and we had signed a deal. We had signed a deal with Capitol, and we had this bad management situation, and, you know, we just got ourselves into a situation where it just wasn't working. You know, our record was sitting on a shelf. You know, we were waiting for it to come out, and you know, I think we didn't have a day where we had that big fight. It was more like I'm starting to do more work in the film business, and the guys were, you know, doing other things, and it just kind of dissipated.
Wow. Are the rest of the band, are they still in the music industry, or they moved on from there as well?
Well, a couple of them are. A couple of them still do stuff. My old bass player is in the best U2 cover band in the world. These guys perform every week, and they're doing other stuff. As a matter of fact, about a year and a half ago, when U2 was playing in Madison Square Garden, they had one night off over an 8-day period. They had, you know, one night where they weren't playing, and his band invited them to come down to play with them, and they did.
Yeah, that is crazy.
The Edge and Adam Claypool, or the drummer, anyway, they played, and people in the audience were like, "Wow, we won the lotto," you know. And it was on the front cover of the New York Post, so, you know, I think he even told me after the show, they said to him, "You know, you guys do this better than we do." But yeah, and then our singer, you know, I became very friendly with Dee Sneider from Twisted Sister.
Okay.
And wrote some songs for him that he eventually recorded. And our lead singer, he loved our lead singer, and he hired him to do backgrounds, and, you know, takes him on the road from time to time.
So how often do you perform now?
You know, it's funny because our band had a reunion.
Nice.
About 3 weeks ago, and it was incredible. And I could not believe, you know, as I said, we were kind of a big deal in Miami, and I would go back, you know, I'm thinking, you know, 20 people will show up. There must have been 1,000. And people came all the way from, you know, South Carolina and New York and New Jersey, and I couldn't believe it. I really could not believe the impact that we had, and it was a great show.
That's got to be something, because you realize, like, especially people around that college years, growing up around that time, they become so locked into who they are that if they get a chance, like, oh my gosh, they're back. Yeah. All right, I'm coming from anywhere I am just to see these guys, because that's going to be a nice
You got to remember, it was a different time, and when we were playing in Florida, the drinking age was 18, and you know, we killed music in this country when we changed the drinking age from 18 to 21. As far as, you know, musicians playing in clubs and all that kind of stuff, because kids would really get behind you. I mean, now I don't know what they do between those ages, and there isn't that sense of loyalty and commitment to following a group and all that kind of stuff, you know. So
comparing the music industry from today until when you were performing, do you feel it's easier now, harder now, in terms of trying to make it?
It's different. It's completely different, because now you can be self-generating. You know, back then the bottleneck was recording. Really, to get a quality recording, you would have to be in a multi-million-dollar studio. That doesn't happen anymore. You can record in your, you know, garage, you know, and come up with a brilliant recording. So you take that factor out, and the accessibility to the marketplace is so much better. But unfortunately, now you have all this noise. You have so many other groups trying to compete and all this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of great music out there. It's just a matter of trying to find it.
So you leave music behind, take the plunge into filmmaking full time. Excuse me. You get Oscar nominated in 1994 for your short subject documentary, "Blood Ties: The Life and Work of Sally Mann."
Yeah.
What's that experience like? All of a sudden, you go from, all right, I'm a musician, I'm going to do filmmaking, and then all of a sudden, boom, you're Oscar nominated.
That was a shock. That was a complete shock. I remember finishing the film. I had a partner that worked on that thing with me, and we did it over the course of maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And we were both at MTV, and he was working in MTV Music News, and he basically said, "Hey, I want to do a film." And I said, "Well, what type of film do you want to make?" He goes, "Well, a documentary." And I was like, "Okay." I like the idea of being self-generating, and we went out to do this to make this film, and it was going to be on all these different artists, and it was during the whole Mapplethorpe, time when art censorship was really becoming a huge issue. And then we interviewed Sally Mann, and that film is a great example of going with your instincts, because we were making this big film about art censorship, but we focused in on Sally Mann, who was an incredible artist, and she photographs her children with a measure of nudity, and she was like a microcosm of the whole issue. And we finished the film. I remember turning to him and saying, "Gosh, this is a great movie." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, well, "What do you think we should do with it?" I go, "I don't know." I go, "What do you think?" He goes, "I don't know." And it really sat on the shelf for about 6 months. He left MTV to get his master's at USC. And while he was there, he met a guy who he showed it to, who said, "My gosh, this is unbelievable. This could be a Academy, nominated movie." And anyway, we started getting into these festivals like Sundance and all,
A small little, I don't know if people have heard about this.
Yeah, but, I this was completely off my radar. And so I went in there completely naive, and it was a wonderful experience. I mean, even the, they do the lunch, for the nominees. And, I asked I was living in New York at the time, and I said to a friend of mine, I said, "You think I should go to this lunch?" He goes, "My gosh, you should go. What are you kidding me? Go." I go, "I don't think anybody's going to be there." And he goes, "Everybody will be there." And I come out to LA, and a friend of mine who's working for Rogers & Cowan, she goes, "Hey, do you need a ride over there?" I said, "Yeah, sure." And we're going in her car, and I go to the Beverly Hilton, and there's all these people there. I go, "Gosh, what's going on here?" She turned to me. She goes, I go, "What is all this for?" And she turned to me, "For you. This is the." I go, "Really?" I go, and sure enough, I get in there.
Were you expecting it to be like going to a Sizzler and just like doing like a lunch buffet and like,
yeah,
"Thanks,
exactly.
guys."
That's what I was expecting. I didn't realize the extent of rolling out the red carpet, and and now we're up on a dais, and this is a good story. So Arthur Hiller, I don't know if you remember him, but
So Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid.
Yeah. He great director, and he was handing out the nominations, and we're on this huge dais. And, my name's Spire, and there's another guy named Steven Spielberg, and he's standing right in front of me, and they're calling people up one after the other, Springsteen, Spire. And this was before, Spielberg had won an Academy Award. So he hadn't won yet. He was up for 4 nominations that year, Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, I got it all backwards, and I thought, oh God, I've got to get by him to get my thing. And I'm going, do I say, "Excuse me, Steven, pardon me, Mr. Spielberg?" And then, the announcer goes, "Oh, 3-time Academy Award nominee, Best Picture, Best Director, Best Visual Effects, Steven Spielberg." The whole place erupted. It was crazy, And then for his documentary film, Blood Ties, the pitter-patter of tiny hands, I walk up, and Arthur Hiller handed me I go, "Man, that's the last time I want to follow Steven Spielberg. He goes, yeah, I get it.
So for you, somebody that's grown up watching films, to all of a sudden be in a room where many of the people that you've either watched or you've loved watching throughout the years are there in that same room. For you, are you just geeking out that whole experience?
It was like I was on cloud nine. Yeah, it was incredible. I couldn't believe they were all there. I mean, everybody that was nominated was there. You know, I just ran into Janet Jackson's old producer, Jam. Oh God, I can't. My mind's up. Anyway, and we were talking about it, and we were like, yeah, wasn't that a fantastic night? I mean, that was, you know.
Do you use that as an opportunity to start just talking to everybody that like I've really loved watching?
No,
or do you just kind of respectful like?
No. Yeah, I didn't know anybody. I'm not that kind of guy. I'm you know, I give people their space, and eventually I met some of those people, but not in that setting. No, no.
So now you were initially reluctant about the whole documentary experience, but once you got into it, what did you love about it?
Well, I do love that it's self-generating, that I don't have to wait for some studio to say, hey, we're going to let you make this movie. It's also an opportunity to be, you are the creator. You get to make all of these decisions that you don't get to do all the time when you're doing a feature film. And it's a lot more hands-on. So when I'm directing a documentary, I often shoot it myself. You know, I'm editing. I'm involved in every aspect of the production. You know, the 2 features I've done. You know, I'd like to do that kind of stuff, but you know, you just have so much time, and there's so many forces, and the production schedule is so compact. So you get to breathe a little bit more, but it's a very, you know, making documentaries is not easy, and I think that that's something people underestimate. I had started out making a bunch of documentaries, and I kept hearing this over and over again. Hey, when are you going to make a real movie? You know, we'll try making a documentary. You know, I mean, any film at 90 minutes to me is difficult. It's like if you're having a story with somebody, you know, try to tell them a story for 90 minutes and see if you can keep them interested.
Yeah, well, I mentioned that the struggle for if you're doing a narrative is that it can take forever to get the green light to do that. But then once you do it, you know, like, all right, we've got, you know, anywhere from a month to maybe 3 to 6 months to shoot this, and we're good. But for a documentary, it could be years that you're shooting this, and so there could be no set schedule or end in sight until you finally get what you're looking for to end the movie.
Well, yeah, and I think that a lot of documentary, unfortunately, things are almost too easy now. And I think the mistake a lot of new filmmakers making documentaries, it's like when somebody comes to me and they go, hey, I shot 400 hours of material, I run the other way. I mean, I realize they're in a position that is not a good position to be in. And that when you add up the amount of time to go through this material, to edit this material, you could have shot in 35 millimeter. So I suggest to any filmmaker making a documentary that they have a very, very good game plan, that they have a treatment from beginning to end, that they have an outline, and that they know their story very well. You know, I didn't start off making documentaries like that, but I do now. I mean, you know, I've been on a couple of documentaries where they kind of spun out of control, and you think, oh gosh, the more I shoot, the better this thing's going to be. I don't believe that at all. You know, I mean, it's great to have the access and to have, you know, these great cameras that can record high quality, and they're not very expensive. But when you start to add up the hours of material, when you do the math, it's not good.
So in terms of, what do you feel comfortable with going into the editing room? How many hours of footage would you like to have?
As few as possible, but I did a documentary where we had maybe 8 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
But as long as if you are on point with the story you want to tell, 8 hours can be more than enough.
Absolutely. And you know, the other thing about when you shoot in film, there's a presence, there's a moment, there's there's a thing. It's like when you push that trigger, all focus is on, okay, that camera is spinning, and it's costing us money. And it's costing us a lot of money, and we have to develop that film. We have to process it. We have to transfer it. We have, the costs are staggering. So you're very conscious of what you're shooting and what you're trying to achieve, But when you have a video camera, you turn it on. Hey, you could turn it off. You don't have that same awareness. Mm-hmm. So I always, with my crews and people that I work with, I have this conversation with them, and I say, hey, I don't want you to shoot just anything. Make everything important. Have a sense of urgency to it.
Because I would imagine for a documentary, you're telling the story twice. One, where you're doing your treatment, figuring everything out, hoping that the story you're going to tell is going to line up with what you've got planned. But then when you're out actually doing it, and the twists and turns that when you have real people telling their story can give you.
Well, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And you have to follow your instincts. You never know where something might lead you. I also, when you see inexperienced people doing documentaries, they have a list of questions and they're going through and they're looking at their questions. And, I do write up questions the night before, and I think of, okay, here are the things I want to try to get through. But, if you're a documentary filmmaker, don't feel like you missed something because you missed asking a question. I think it's more about engaging with the subject, trying to, and sometimes you have to try to earn their trust. You have to try to get them to reveal more than they were expecting to reveal.
So this is a nice segue into your latest film, Spirit Game, Pride of the Nation. As we're talking about storytelling, this is an athletic story that you're telling, a competition. So where the ending is not certain one way or the other. So
oh my! Did you talk about the not ending? I mean, I don't know if we got this across, but if you watch the game, if you watch the movie, there's the game where they play the USA, mm-hmm. and they're behind, and I'm telling you, the feeling in that arena was tremendous disappointment at what was occurring, and my partner, we both like ran. We ran into the into the hallway between the locker rooms, and we're like, we kind of met each other. Go, what are you doing here? He goes, what are you doing here? I go, I can't watch that anymore. He goes, I can't either. I go, can you believe what's happening? I go, no. I mean, if they lose, we don't have a movie. I mean, what kind of movie are we going to be able to tell if they lose? I mean, it was. I think I was the happiest guy in that arena when they turned it around.
It's so for you, as you're writing this treatment before you start shooting, are you anticipating they're going to go all the way to the finals and fingers crossed they win it? We've got a great ending to this film.
Well, yeah, that is definitely the hope. And I mean, we did talk about the potential of them not winning, and what we could do, and how we tell this story if they don't win, or if they don't get into the finals and they don't do these other things. We did talk about it. It would have been a different film.
Now, one person that you had in there speaking for a little bit was Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
Which I did not realize. Is he a huge lacrosse fan?
He is. Not only was he was a player, he was a captain of his team.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I can't think of the university he went to, but he was a captain, and he loves lacrosse. And I was warned that he was not a personable guy, a friendly guy. Expect that. And we had a gift for him. We had a lacrosse stick made by the ultimate lacrosse stick maker, a guy named Alfie Jocks, and we were going to give it to him after the interview. But I told my executive producer, I said, let's give it to him before the interview. And I mean, he came in, he goes, hey guys, I don't have a lot of time, I mean, it was right before the season.
Yeah.
And he goes, I don't have a lot of time, and I go, hey, we'd like to give this to you. Oh my gosh. Is this an Alfie Jocks stick? I go, yeah. He goes, oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, they told me, I think that's the happiest we've ever seen Bill.
Because I feel like watching interviews with him, if you're talking to him and it doesn't relate to the Patriots, the current season or anything like that, but if you're talking about history of sports, then I feel like he's a guy that is just exciting to talk to.
He is, and he was great, and he knew a lot about the game, and he knew a lot about these guys. I was, very, very pleased with how that worked out. Unfortunately, in terms of our storytelling, having Bill in there more than we had him, which was only one clip, didn't really work for us. But we're glad, having his name associated with our film's a good thing.
So speaking of, let's go all the way to the beginning. When does this story kind of come on your radar?
Well, I'm part of a company called One Bowl Productions, and we have a couple of other partners, Chris Brewster and Gail Ann Kelly, and we're developing we're trying to develop a miniseries on the whole Iroquois history. And our writer, Scott Sturgeon, had stumbled across a story about their lacrosse team. And we thought, well, gosh, this might actually make for a wonderful documentary. And when I realized what Orrin was doing, using this game to create awareness of their sovereignty, I thought, my gosh, this is a great story. And the way they play the game is so different from anyone else. I mean, they have this kind of, intuitive ability to do things that other people can't do.
It is so interesting, especially for the beginning, because the way you kind of interweave the whole lacrosse journey for them in competitions, but then also just as they're trying to want to use their own passports when they're going to the UK and they're denied access because they don't recognize those passports, and the struggles that they're going to as the indigenous people on this continent. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people, when I tell them this, they can't even believe it, that there's a nation within our nation, the United States, of people that travel on their own passports. They don't use American and Canadian passports. And they're like, what?
I did not know that until I watched this film.
Yeah, oh, no, you're believe me, you're in the majority. I mean, I would say this is an unfortunate untold story, And I'm hoping to create some awareness that, they are here, they are important to listen to, and they deserve our respect.
And coincidentally enough, I was doing a interview for a show I was doing last night, where it was we were talking to a gentleman who played lacrosse, grew up in New Jersey, loved playing lacrosse, was coming and moved out here and does a couple pickup leagues and stuff. Mm-hmm. But just talking about, that was the first time I'd ever heard it. It described as medicine.
Yeah.
So that now watching your film and it's like having the full context of that, understanding how he was really talking about like just the very spiritual and sacred place that this game has for them.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, how we have our creation story of Adam and Eve in paradise. I mean, they have their creation story, and it's about lacrosse. It's about, these two guys playing lacrosse together, and that's how the earth was created. I mean, we have our wonderful story, and they have their wonderful story.
And I like the way that game is used as a way to not have war, but a way to still settle conflicts.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's so beautiful. And I learned a lot from the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois. Haudenosaunee is their indigenous name, but one of the great things is to embrace the idea of playing the game, not the idea that we have to win. And I think that the rest of, I coach my kids in the Little League, and, you see the parents and the craziness that goes on. And I think, well, gosh, you don't see that on native reservations. I mean, they play as hard as they can, and they do what they can, and it doesn't matter, as long as they gave their all, that's what it's about.
So when you hear about the story, basically, do you approach them and say, like, we want to follow you on this journey for the next couple of years?
Yeah, we did, and we did get the support of their nation, financially, and I think spiritually. I mean, they really were there to help guide us. Orrin Lyons, who's one of their elders and one of the chiefs of their nation, put together kind of a mission statement for us. And when I read the thing, I got to be honest with you, I thought, there's no way we're going to accomplish this. There's no way we can put in some of these ideas that they have, particularly about the doctrine of discovery. And somehow we did. I mean, somehow that gets fused into the film, and I think it works very well.
It's to see their pursuit of when Pope Francis is coming in to visit, and they want to try to arrange a meeting.
I know.
And just seeing how they're sidelined throughout that whole process. to wear the leader's headdress. It's just left on a table all alone.
Yeah. It is sad. I mean, I think that, again, they're unrecognized for the gifts that they could give us. And, to me, every kid should know what the Doctrine of Discovery is. That it's probably the most important and the most destructive document ever created against mankind. I mean, that document gave free rein to all of these European nations to go into these uncharted lands, and if they saw people there, they were considered animals. They were considered occupants. They had no claim to title.
Which is it sounds so bizarre to hear now that a society could function like that. But it has changed the course of what at least American history would be. Right?
Yeah, and I don't think we get the full scope of our American history. We get a lot of the positive, but we don't. I think there's a lot of things that we should, if we're going to be honest about American history, go into. And this is one aspect that isn't covered.
True. When they give the figures where the original settlers were about 250,000. And the native were 16 million?
Yeah, no, they've been reduced to 250,000.
Okay.
So at one point, historians have said, between 16 and 20 million people were here, and by the end of 1900, it was 250,000.
Man.
Yeah, I mean, if that's not genocide,
so
I don't know what is.
When you start filming, and for when they're going to the UK.
Yeah.
I mean, having these things that just add to the story, where the fact that they decide to not go because of their passports aren't accepted.
Yeah, and it was exactly, some people said, well, the players became pawn in this big chess match, and that they should have just accepted the American and Canadian passports. But yeah, that's not what they're about. I mean, they want to be recognized as a sovereign nation.
Because the comments that you have from there, they're like they should have been more respectful to the game of lacrosse and just accepted one of these passports rather than like, well, these are people that pretty much created this game, and you're telling them no, they now need to go by your rules. Different folks within the lacrosse community, had their own opinions about that. Yeah. Now, I also want to talk about certainly the way that the Canadians approach this whole situation as well too. Because they come with the idea like, oh, well, we did like the boxing, the box
lacrosse. Yeah, they created. Yes. People don't realize, but everyone thinks, well, Canadians are hockey players. Well, actually, they're hockey and lacrosse players, and lacrosse is their national sport, and that's unrecognized. They have two national sports. One is hockey, and one is lacrosse. So you have, millions and millions of Canadian kids playing lacrosse.
It's always interesting, especially when I was talking to this person yesterday, where so many people pursue sports, at least in the States, with the idea that perhaps we're lucky we can get to go do this professionally. But for like lacrosse, that is one that is not really, those opportunities don't exist, at least in the States. But Canada, it certainly does.
Well, there is a professional league here. I mean, and it's growing rapidly. I mean, ESPN says that lacrosse is the fastest growing sport. And I really think, maybe 10 years from now, we might be looking at lacrosse like we look at football. And with the injuries associated with football and the concussions, you don't have that in lacrosse. Mm-hmm. So it's still a great, game that has a lot of physical contact, but it doesn't have the long, devastating injuries that you have in football.
The scene between one of the Canadian representatives and one of the tribal elders, who's suffering. He's had a stroke. He's already said, I can't. My memory's not right there. But it gets really, really contentious.
Got a little heated. And I can't believe we pulled that whole scene off. And I've got to credit my partner, Peter Baxter. He was there at that interview, and he conducted that interview. And it was supposed to be a very friendly thing. Dean French, because we were challenging the Canadians as to why they did not get their passports stamped. And he felt that their previous treaties basically said, "Hey, we don't need to do that." I think he was under the misunderstanding that Irv, was okay with this. And when they got there, well, yeah.
That I can only imagine. What did your partner say about like when they wrapped that interview? Is it just like everybody's just kind of very quiet? All right, we're just gonna go our separate ways.
I mean, Dean felt a little ambushed by that, I think, and we tried to figure that out a little bit, and speak with him about it, but he wasn't completely comfortable.
Do you think it was something deliberate from the Canadians, or because they, of course, their point of view is like, well, no, you said it wasn't mandatory. Like if we wanted to, we could do this, but it wasn't like an expectation.
It's a political issue, and they have political issues in Canada, and they felt like, well, if we recognize the Haudenosaunee, then we might have to recognize Quebec. That could be a whole Pandora's box.
So now we get to actually shooting this. Had you ever shot sports before?
I have, but lacrosse was a little bit different. I mean, I've shot kickboxing and boxing before, but I don't have a lot of experience. And I looked at a lot of tape, a lot of lacrosse games, and what I realized was that lacrosse, it's a great game, but it's hard to follow. It's very fast, and one of the things I felt like we needed to do was to slow down the game, and hence we have a lot of slow motion.
Which I really liked because it made it easier to follow some of the passes and stuff, and the shots.
Yeah, because it happened so quickly. I mean, in real time, and it's exciting to watch. But on television, I felt like it wasn't a great spectator sport with the way they cover it. I mean, it's really so. I mean, the two things I wanted to do was to get more intimate with the players, so we incorporated the use of very long lenses. I had a 1,000 millimeter or a 400 with a doubler that made it an 800. Really, really long lenses. Which, when you deal with longer lenses now, you have issues of light because it really cuts down. Some of these lenses were like f8 or something. They weren't very fast. So we had, and you shoot slow motion. Now you're actually slow. There were a lot of things to deal with.
So one of the for the Iroquois, they're the Thompson brothers.
Yeah,
they're a nice little piece of animation as you break down how they kind of correlate to different animals and how those kind of fit into how they play amongst the team. Really cool piece of animation. What made you decide like I want to kind of take that and marry it with animation?
That piece actually was something that had already been created.
Oh wow!
And it was created by Nike.
Oh, cool.
And we thought, gosh, they did help us financially with the film. This was something that we saw that we thought was really beautiful and worked very well. And it's a little bit of a left turn in the film. I mean, we weren't sure whether, because we don't really have that kind of imagery in the picture, but it just felt like it captured that mythology.
Well, speaking of Nike, there is the scene where they're going there and they're signing that agreement again, and I feel like it's just the way that the Iroquois deal with that is just like a sense of humor, but you can just tell underneath it they are just like some bitterness, where it's like, oh, if we sign this, we get our land back.
I think it was more in fun. I mean, I think they were very eager to have that kind of partnership. Lacrosse needs a big strategic player, and Nike can come in and provide that. I mean, to be on that banner is a big deal. When you look at the Nike campus and you see Rafa Nadal, or you see Tom Brady or whomever, you see these huge athletes, and then this lacrosse player, and you're like, wow, they're really trying. I think they see the future, and they it's the fastest growing sport. A lot of kids are getting into it. Hey, if I had a kid that age, and he wanted to play football, I'd tell him, no, you're going to play lacrosse.
Because I feel like, because when he does make that joke about if I sign this, I get my land back, do you feel like that the only way for them to deal with their situation, the things they're working on, is they have to just see the humor in it? Oh, God, yeah. I mean, and a lot of people, they have a very dry sense of humor. I mean, they are very funny.
I mean, when you see them, you think, oh gosh, they're really serious, but there's a lot going on there. And the Iroquois in particular are the diplomats for the native people. If there's things happening, wounded knee, they'll be the first to go there to negotiate. They're very good negotiators. I mean, that's why, in a sense, even though so much harm has been done to native people, the Iroquois are the most preserved in their traditions and their ceremonies and everything else. I mean, they've been very, very cunning and crafty at keeping their sovereignty, and they're the only nation that does have their own passport, and where their passports are recognized. England didn't do it in 2010, but they did it in previous years, and they're negotiating now to now receive those passports.
So for you, this film, as we talked about before, it's like you kind of get your game plan, you shoot the film, and hopefully everything goes according to plan, but there's always things that come up left and right. For you, the final result, as you finish the film, how close does that kind of line up to where you thought this film was going to go to where it ended up?
I think we achieved what we wanted to achieve. I mean, looking back at it, here was the biggest problem of the movie. We had a great game plan. We had a fantastic game plan. And unfortunately, Oren, sabotaged our game plan a little bit in a good way. There are two events that are happening. There's the 2014 Outdoor Lacrosse Championships, and it's the first time that the Iroquois medaled. Now, we had no intention of covering that event in the way that we did. And I basically our plan was I was going to be there for the 2 weeks that they were going to do the thing, so I could get up to speed with shooting lacrosse, figuring out the angles, getting to know the players and all this kind of stuff. I mean, we had planned to actually shoot maybe 1 or 2 days. And I get off the plane, get into my hotel room, and I get a call from Warren, and he goes, hey, you're going to have a crew there tonight, right? I go, crew? What are you talking about? He goes, well, you got to cover, we're going to have a practice, and I want you to be there. I go, Warren, I don't have a crew. Well, I think you should get a crew, and you need to be here. And I talked to my executive producer, and I said, Gail, it's really not in the budget to do this. And she goes, look, if Oren is requesting it, just do it. And we ended up shooting for 17 days. So in a way, we kind of blew out our budget. We had to go for additional funding and all that kind of stuff. But and it's great that we documented that they got the bronze medal and that they medaled. And it was the first time they did that, and it was a huge step for them after coming out of the 2010 being denied into the games, and it was a huge step forward for them. Ideally, I wanted the film to be just about Onondaga, about having the games on their reservation and, showing their culture, the event. I thought the games would be manageable, so it was a lot of story to tell. And you can't even believe how much footage we had. I mean, when I mentioned earlier that you shouldn't overshoot, well, I was definitely guilty of overshooting on, that project. Yeah.
And I can imagine that's the toughest thing, because I'm sure there are storylines that you love that you just had to cut out.
Oh my gosh, they're a lot. And, and with Native people, it takes a little while to develop something, to develop a storyline. So there were things that were great that just took too long, and yeah, that was, it's heartbreaking, thinking back about some of the things that we had to we had to cut.
Now, when it does come out available for DVD or Blu-ray, will there be any additional story elements on there?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know.
Peter, I need the answer now. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, a Spirit game, Pride of a Nation, is going to come out in theaters May 26th, this Friday, and then also is going to be available on video on demand and iTunes come June 20th. You excited to finally have this out for people to see it?
I am very excited. Can't wait.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest has been Peter Spirer. And Peter, if they want to follow you all on the social media to keep up to date with Spirit Game as well as other projects you're working on, where's the best place to find you?
Facebook and IMDb. My website is under construction right now, but I hope to have that up soon.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Peter, thanks so much for coming in and talking about this. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Frank Moran. I've been your host here. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HappyGoJackie. We'll see you next time here for another episode of iTalk Movies right here on Popcorn Talk. Bye.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.